Hi everybody, I'm back to do another movie review. This time it is for Imprint by Takashi Miike. As I mentioned before, this was a part of the Masters of Horror series on Showtime. It was supposed to be the 13th episode of the first season. It was never aired on television. It was too controversial. I should start this, let me get comfortable. I should start this by stating that this review will contain spoilers, so if you don't want to know, I would highly recommend that you watch the movie first and then come back and see if our opinions mesh. Basically, Imprint is the story of a man named Christopher who's promised to return for a prostitute he's fallen in love with and to bring her to America named Komomo. He goes to, in search of her, lands in a certain place where there are prostitutes. You learn very quickly as he's making the boat ride across this kind of swampy area with a boat full of men that life is not good for prostitutes, especially pregnant ones, because as he goes by, there's a dead body floating in the swamp. When they flip it over, it's a very dead, very heavily pregnant woman. He goes into the island, asks this little man who comes up kind of creepy. I think I recognize him from several movies, including Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I think he was the Oompa Loompas. I could be wrong, though. But he asks if he knows who Komomo is. The man tells him he does not. He wants to leave. The little man insists that he stays for the night. He tells him to pick a girl. He ends up seeing a girl who's kind of shying away and staying toward the back away from everyone else. He picks her. He goes to his room. She comes inside. You quickly see that she's disfigured. The whole side of her face is just horribly disfigured. As she sits beside him, he asks her, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. She says that you knew Komomo. He asks her if she knew her. She says yes. And she proceeds to tell him that Komomo had died several months prior of a broken heart because her love never came. He breaks down into a fit of rage, despair. He's so destroyed by the information. He asks what happens, and essentially what happens is he's given two different stories from the girl. The first story being when he demands to know is that she goes into her life because he says, "Tell me a story." I should say at this point he's good and liquored up with sake. So he's flying pretty good. She tells him that she lived outside on the outskirts of the villages with her mother, who was a midwife, and her father, who had cancer. That their life was not, the perfect life, but it was good enough for her. That her father continued getting more sick and iller. He was vomiting blood and whatnot. Eventually, he drowns himself in the creek in front of their home because he doesn't want to be a burden. When this happens, her mother can no longer take care of her, so she is sold to someone who, and then it begins a downward trajectory of her being sold over and over and over again. Eventually she comes to the whorehouse where Komomo is. Everyone treats her very poorly, but the only person who's a kind soul to her is Komomo. She and Komomo are friends, but all the other girls are jealous of Komomo because she's the most beautiful of all the girls there. So one day the mistress of the house, her jade ring, goes missing. She tells him that it was done as a jealous act against Komomo. Komomo is then tortured brutally, and as a consequence, afterwards, she hangs herself out of shame. The man doesn't believe this. He thinks that the girl is leaving something out. He demands to know the truth, and she then tells him, "Why do you want to know the truth? Sometimes a story is better than the truth." When he won't relent, she finally goes into a different story. In this story, she tells him that Komomo and her, that she was kind to her and that they were friends, but essentially she stole the jade ring. And when she went to see Komomo, who was still brutally tortured in the same fashion, that it was her that killed her. She then explained she had to kill her because she's so evil that by being friends with her, that Komomo would have been sent straight to hell for just even being friends with her. When he demands to know more, she eventually relays her real life, which was essentially that her mother was not a midwife. She performed abortions. And her father beat them both pretty liberally. He was pretty bad. Life was not good for her. One day her father was actually beating her mother until the point her mother ran. Then he turns on his daughter, raped her. She had had enough by that point, and she takes a very blunt object. You can't really see it. It's so dark, and she kills him. The man still insists that she's not telling him everything. He wants to know everything, what is going on. And it's at this point that she kind of goes crazy screaming, but you hear this other voice, and the voice is nowhere in the room. Everybody, he's kind of looking around. He doesn't know where it's coming from. And then she starts relaying the truth about herself and about her upbringing and whatnot. And you essentially find out, because It's kind of messed up. But eventually you see her scalp peeling away, and you see that she's got a little hand right here, and you find out that she's got a twin who's growing out of her head, a little sister who's got a mouth and teeth that's disgusting beyond belief. But that her mother and father were brother and sister, and that she was condemned before she was even born because of what they were to one another, and that is why she is the way she is, disfigured and with the parasitic twin in her head. When he demands, this sounds so surreal, me saying it, when he demands to know more, the little hand, spits out the ring and just keeps, it's a descent into madness at this point. He finally tells them, I'm going to give you what you want and send you to hell. He takes out his gun, he shoots them in the chest. The girls, both the hand and the girl, are like, you can't kill us, and he picks the gun up and shoots them in the head. When he does, their body whips back to the point you can't see their heads. When she comes back up, it's Komomo, and she says, I waited for you for so long. And then it goes to a later portion of the movie. He's in prison. I didn't mention this before, but one of the reasons he stated that he loved Komomo so much was she reminded him of his sister who was killed, but then you kind of are given it kind of implicates that he had something to do with her murder. So as he's sitting there, the guards bring him nasty food and tea, which they dump into a bucket. He eats some of the food. He goes to scoop some of the tea, I'm assuming, out of the bucket, and when he does, he sees a dead fetus surrounded by what looks like brain matter, and he hoists it up, starts singing to the fetus, and then you look over and you see Komomo blowing on a windmill and his little sister, and then the movie ends. Without a doubt, Takashi Miike comes up with some extreme messed up stuff. When I watched this movie, it was the first time I'd ever seen anything this extreme. I had always watched movies that were horror, but I had never seen anything like this. I mean, this was my introduction to, oh wow, there's more out there. And that's when the love of extreme stuff developed. I will tell you this, if you are adverse to things such as aborted fetuses, and it's shown in very graphic detail, scenes of torture, scenes with brain matter, scenes that are just damn disturbing, you might want to stay away from this movie. I'm just doing that as a warning to you. I haven't seen this in several years. I owned it and then I could never find it again. I was so upset, so I'm glad to have it as part of my collection once more, but I can say that it carries the same punch that it did when I watched it several years ago. I'm going to go into my ratings now so my review's not overly long. I'm looking at my timer. Sexuality, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. You don't see too much, but there's a scene involving rape, as well as some breasts that you see, so I'm going to rate it as a 3 out of 5. Violence, I'm going to rate this one as a 5 out of 5. It is a violent film, and it has some very violent imagery, more graphic imagery, but still, which takes us to the gore. The gore in this, for me, is definitely a 5 out of 5. I'm sorry, I keep pointing it in the wrong way. I'm trying not to get the glare. Seeing dead fetuses is really difficult for me. It's something, I guess that's my own little quirk. I can't really deal with that real well. But there's also other scenes with the torture. The girl has needles pierced under her nails. Her gums are pulled back and they are pierced as well. She's burned under the arms with sticks that are lit on fire. When the girl is shot in the head at the end and she comes back and veers forward and it's Komomo, she actually reaches in the back and grabs a handful of brain matter and holds it out. It's good and gory and just plain disgusting. So definitely a 5 out of 5. My overall enjoyment of this film is the same as it was when I watched it before. I'd give it a 4 out of 5. It's definitely a film that is not for the queasy stomached, or for those who don't like their horror extreme and dark. I can see why it was not played on television. I'm not saying it shouldn't have been, but I can understand why Showtime was hesitant to do so. It's very graphic, and it's something that will stick with you. The best way I know to describe it is even when you're done with this film, because like now, it's been several years since I watched it, but I remember feeling the same way. It leaves a permanent imprint on you. You'll never forget this movie. I never forgot it, which is why I wanted to find it again. And now I know it's going to stick in my head for quite some time. So if you've not seen Imprint, there you go. You can find it online. It's definitely, for the extreme horror fanatic, gore and all that, it's definitely something you should check out. I'm hoping that tonight that I can watch Aftermath Genesis. So if I get the opportunity, if I don't watch that, we're going to watch the movie exam that we rented. But either way, hopefully I'll have another review coming for you tomorrow. So thank you so much for your comments. Thanks for stopping by, and I'm sure I'm going to chat and talk with you soon. And that's about all. All right. Bye.